Welcome to Planet Geo, the podcast where we talk about our amazing planet, how it works, and why it matters to you. Chris.
No kidding, Dr. Rymank. Holy cow.
You're the one I'm always editing out your coughs in our audio. But
no, not today.
Give me, I've got a little bit of a bug now, so I don't sound myself.
You don't. You sound sick. You don't sound well.
No,
but
that's
you say
right.
you say you feel well, so that's
I do
important.
feel well, and Chris, I feel even better after that conversation. That was this was a great interview. This was a very fun, very cool. Shawn Willsey is just he's a very passionate educator, and it comes across in his YouTube channel and in our conversation here.
That absolutely is the case. I had two takeaways here, Jesse. One is that just this kind of service mentality, maybe, I guess is the way I would put it. He is very passionate about the geosciences and wants to serve the greater community in terms of, look, I can communicate these things in a way that a lot of people are going to understand. And that's his motivation. That to me came through. The other takeaway I had is that I need to update my Roadside geologies. Okay,
yeah.
so
you're over there reading the Geology of Idaho, Roadside Geology of Idaho from 1980 like an idiot, and there's a brand new one.
I didn't realize
that you got to get. That's funny. Yeah, absolutely. So Shawn Willsey is he's a professor at College of Southern Idaho. He's written a couple books, co-authored and authored. The Geology Underfoot of Southern Idaho is one of them, and Roadside Geology of Idaho. You can buy those on his website. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. He's got his Bachelor of Science from Weber State University in Geology and a Master's from Northern Arizona. And, it's really kind of, as he describes it, well, his YouTube channel has gotten a lot more popular since the Iceland stuff about a year ago. It really does amazing field geology-based YouTube series. So, going around with a video camera and him and some notes, it's a really cool. It just reminded me of Chris I said this in the interview, but it just reminds me of geology field courses or field trips. Like almost all of them I've been on or TA'd, it's kind of the same dynamic. It's like, look at the rocks, then look at a little sketch that simplifies the rocks, or make your own sketch that simplifies the rocks or interprets the rocks, then look back at the rocks. I mean, it's that dynamic. And his channel reminded me of every field course I ever took or TA'd.
Or that you wanted to be a part of.
And that, yeah, exactly right. And that's a massive compliment, because it's like, that's a cool thing to be able to provide to people, I think. A cool experience.
Absolutely. I love the hand-drawn diagrams that he uses so often on his YouTube channel. I guess I love it because that's also my style. I'm drawn on the side of the bus, I'm drawn on a trailer, or I'm drawn on a piece of paper in front of my students. I'm trying to get, 20 kids around my drawing, and that's the vibe of his YouTube channel, which I really appreciate. It's really good.
Very cool. Very cool stuff. And I encourage everybody to go check out his YouTube channel. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, but it's at Shawn Willsey, Willsey. And you can check out more about Professor Shawn Willsey at willseygeology.com. Chris, what do you say? Should we get to the interview?
Let's go.
Let's do it. Okay. Shawn, welcome to Planet Geo. Pleasure to have you here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of your guys' podcast and just looking forward to our conversation together.
No, thanks. I mean, I think we were exchanging emails and talked, and we kind of stumbled across each other around about the same time. I think I forget what I was down a YouTube hole on geology something, and I came across your videos, and then I sent you an email, and you're like, "Oh, actually, I just listened to your podcast." I forget why you stumbled across our podcast, but it was around about the same time.
Yeah, I was doing a big drive back from Utah, from Vernal. I'd just done some videos down there, and was looking for something to listen to. And I had listened to your guys' videos earlier, but somehow didn't save them in Spotify or whatever. And so kind of forgot about it, apologized. And so then I found
Chris is very forgettable. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, rediscovered it again, and so it was really fun because I'm like, oh yeah, it's these guys. And so then it was real exciting, and then I just went episode after episode.
Yeah,
so it was
fun. That's awesome.
So Shawn, I got a question for you. I was actually watching some of your YouTube videos, and maybe it was on your website. I actually can't remember anymore because I, did a deep dive into you. You talked about your story, though, how you got into geoscience. And I couldn't believe how similar it was to my story. I feel like I was kind of dragged into geoscience, kind of kicking and screaming because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And you kind of had this same kind of story. So can you tell us about that? Like, what got you? What was your aha moment of, this is my path in life?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't think I was really kicking and screaming, but I think it was more ignorance. That would be maybe the theme for me. So my dad was in the Air Force. We lived all over the West, hopping from base to base never lived in a place for more than a couple of years. And I think as a kid, I remember being into dinosaurs, and this was like pre-Jurassic Park. So this was I was the OG dinosaur kid, I guess. And then I remember looking at maps a lot. When they would load us up in the car and we'd drive to some other place to go live, I just remember looking out the window and I'd have my atlas in front of me. And I'm always thinking like, okay, there's that mountain. And I was keeping track of where we were and wondering what was over on the other side of the mountain and what did it look like from the top. And so I think that was like the seeds that were planted. And then, we all go into junior high and puberty and we all kind of turn into crazy people. And I kind of forgot it all until I got to college, and I had no idea what I wanted to be or do. I knew some things I didn't want to do. And so
what were those?
I think that's just anything medical. Like I'm squeamish with blood and guts.
Biology.
Yeah. Blood and guts. We're nothing in accounting or finance. Like there were definite like red flags that were just like a no-go for me, but I didn't really think about science. I didn't know what I was going to go into. I just knew college was important. That was, sort of, I guess, expected of me, or that's just seemed like the natural progression. And so I just started taking generals, just like most students do at the college I teach at, and checking the boxes and getting through those. And it wasn't but at the same time, I also had become very interested in outdoor recreation. So I'd started rock climbing and backpacking and just doing all these outdoor things. And so I think I knew that something outdoor-ish made a lot of sense for me. And it wasn't until my third year of college, I don't even remember why or how I enrolled in it, but I took a physical geology class with a buddy and really liked it and did well. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to take another one. And I think I was in the third quarter. We were on a quarter system. I was into my third quarter, and I realized you could major in geology. And so it was just a snowball for me. Yeah. And I had no idea. There was no conception about, this degree will get me to this career, or this is how I'm going to make money off of this. I was just down the rabbit hole, just like, okay, now at least I have a focus. I have something to work towards. And I was never thinking about how this was going to turn into like a paycheck down the road.
You just kind of knew that this was the path. You had to figure the rest out later, right? I mean,
yeah. And I did take, at one point I remember before geology, I thought, well, maybe I'll be a forest ranger because that's outdoors, right? So I took a intro to forestry class, and we went up to the Uinta Mountains in Utah, and it was beautiful. And I was outside, so I was excited, but we spent the day like looking at the tree closely and measuring things and taking samples of the bark. And I remember thinking, I like trees, but not this much. And so that was like, okay, I don't want to be a forestry major. So again, it was good to and I tell my students now, like, it's okay not to know what you want to do. It's just as important to figure out what you don't want to do.
That's really good advice.
So what was the class? What was your first class? Was it like an intro geology class, or was it something different?
I think I was in I don't even know how this happened, because I'd already done 2 years of college, but I didn't have an associate's degree yet. I'd done some part-time semesters, and I was taking the scenic route for sure. And I think I was in an earthquakes and volcanoes class that was like 3 credits. And then I was also in a physical geology or intro to geology class. Okay, so and I don't even remember. I'd have to look at the transcript and see who the professor was. And they might have been awesome, but I think it was more the content. I'm sure it was partly the delivery, but the content was very captivating. And
do you find that now that you're on the other side of the podium, as it were, I'm curious what you think of the shift, because I think that the geosciences are undergoing this really sort of seismic shift as far as the job market. We're shifting from oil and gas into oil and gas plus a whole bunch of other stuff that geoscientists can go do. Do you find that there's a different motivation? Because I think like you guys and me too, we got into geology for the passion of it. But do you feel like students are going into it for different reasons? Because I think there's some students, definitely a large fraction, might have a different motivation for getting into it, as opposed to, hey, this is cool, I got to study it. Where does the paycheck come down?
Are you talking about maybe the environmental side, Jesse?
I don't know, partially environmental. We have a bunch of like earth science policy, sustainability is such a motivating factor for students. And I think, in the mining industry as well, perhaps too. I don't know. That's just my sense. I'm curious, Shawn, if you think that's the same. if you see the same trend or not.
I think I see, it's probably a little different where I'm at versus you're at, but where I'm at here at a 2-year college in Idaho, I see it's similar to what I was involved with when I was there. And I feel like I'm the Kool-Aid salesman. I'm giving them a sample of the Kool-Aid and they're trying it. I don't think most of my students, some of which came in as geology majors, but most of which didn't. Most of them took my class and some of them had their aha moment, at least up to this point, and decided to major in it. I haven't polled them, but I don't think they know. That's part of what I think my role and job is to help them this next year or so. Okay, where's this going to go? What's the pathway for you forward? But I don't think they really know where it's going to take them, just like I didn't know. I had no clue what my career was going to be at the end of my educational journey.
Yeah, okay. But that's such an interesting position to be in. I'd be curious how you advise students in that regard. But Chris, sorry for interrupting. You got a question?
No, actually, we can follow that line if you want. Shawn, I'm just curious, how many classes do you offer where you are? How far do you go?
Yeah, great question. It's interesting at a 2-year college because we're mainly trying to get them that associate's degree or something comparable. We also collectively at our school offer lots of vocational programs like welding and all sorts of things, nursing, things like that, of course. But for geology, it's just the basics. My students are taking their calculus here, they're taking their physics, their chemistry, and all their gen ed classes. And so I tell them, hey, you're doing kind of the hard work now, that when you transfer from here, if you get all this done here, you'll transfer as a junior and you'll have just the geology courses mainly ahead of you. So we have physical geology and historical geology, 101, 102 for the majors. And then I have a field geology class, 275, which is not a field camp class. It's more, we pick a location, we learn about it, and then we go there. So
how long do you spend in the field then with them?
For the field geology class, it's like a week. So last year we went
really
to Iceland.
Awesome. Okay.
The year before that, I took students to Hawaii. So sometimes it's exotic and sometimes it's, let's go down to Great Basin National Park or Yellowstone or whatever.
You are spoiled for places to go with cool geology from Southern Idaho. That's amazing.
We don't have to go very far.
You don't have to go to Iceland to get cool stuff, but yeah, that's awesome.
But those are the main classes. And then there's, for gen ed people, there's like Geology of National Parks and natural disasters. And that's pretty much the suite of classes I teach.
That's a nice lift. Yeah.
That is. I don't think that's very typical for a 2-year college, is it, Shawn? This is more robust than what's typical, don't you think?
I think it's pretty typical. I think most of the other schools I've seen do something similar where I have a colleague that teaches at the 2-year college near Boise. And it's similar. So my students aren't taking much geology. They're getting most of those background courses. They're not getting mineralogy, petrology here. They're not getting, SED strats and field methods, and everything else is ahead of them. But for a lot of students, those physics classes, those calculus classes, those chemistry classes, those can be maybe not deal breakers, but they can be tricky and hard. And by them getting it done here early, then they'll transfer and they'll just have geology, whereas some of their peers that have been at that 4-year school might be seniors taking structural geology, but they're also taking physics and calculus because they've kind of waited to do those. So
that's a really good point. Jesse, what do you find in Pennsylvania or around your area? I just don't, maybe it's geographic.
We have a bit of a different system. In Pennsylvania, I don't think, however, that many students get, as Chris is saying, the breadth of stuff that you're giving them. I think it's a lot of like physical geology or intro level geology. They might get like a groundwater geochemistry or something in that kind of what for us is a 200 level class. But mostly when they then like after 2 years, they get all their hard gen eds out of the way as you're describing. And then they will come to the main campus or the University Park campus and some of them will dive right into the 200 levels, but they often they don't get the breadth that you're giving them. And they start in their 3rd year taking 200 level classes and they kind of have to play catch up a little bit because of that. So my sense is I'd agree with Chris. I don't know in the details, but most of them I think are not as deep as sort of what you're giving them. So that's awesome. Certainly no field course. That's very cool.
Yeah, the field course is sort of show and tell geology. It's not like they're out there, with the Brunton compass doing things, but they take field notes, it's observations, and then, coming up with questions and hypotheses. So it's doing a lot of that stuff. They're just not mapping per se. But we do hear that our students, when they transfer, they come in, because I ask them, I'm like, hopefully I've prepared you well as you transfer. How are you stacking up with your peers? And by and large, they're like, yeah, like I'm right where I should be, or I'm ahead of my peers. Like they're showing us how to use this brunt and compass, and you already showed me how to do that in historical geology or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
oh, that's awesome.
But Shawn, show and tell is, I think, so important because you're the hook.
yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that kind of, Jesse, you're not in this realm. I don't think you.
I'm a
PhD
terrible
students,
hook. Is that what you're saying?
Well, Chris and I are we're the Kool-Aid salespeople, right?
You're dang right.
By the time they're in
Absolutely.
Jesse's doors, they've already like committed to their Kool-Aid and they're addicts at that point. But Chris and I are getting them, hooked on the stuff. And you're right, the show and tell courses are important because for a lot of students, they're like, hey, I think I want to do this geology thing. And they go on the field trip and this big field course. And for the most part, I get students who come out of it and now they're locked in. Like, yes, this is definitively what I want to do. I thought I had good intentions or ideas about this, but now I feel really committed. And so that's nice for me is that they get a little taste of that.
I am just such a huge fan of two-year colleges because of this. I mean, in Pennsylvania, the branch campuses, the students who come into the geoscience program start taking the 300, 400 levels. Like I have a couple in my research group who've done this path. I mean, it's just an amazing way to do it. I'm such a huge fan of this process. And Chris, we were talking, I think Adam Simon did this in his career trajectory as well. He went to a two-year college, Northern Virginia Community College or something like that is what it used to be called. It might still be that. But it's just such a valuable way to kind of get that exposure, that breadth of exposure to what do you want to do? I don't know. You get to figure it out over 2 years with a massive amount of exposure and come out of that really motivated and sort of have a clear direction. I think it's an amazing.
And I think too, they get, and this is not a blanket statement, so don't take it the wrong way, but I think by and large, generically, they get better instruction. Like my world, Jesse, you and I basically have the same title per se, but we do very different things. I am totally teaching based. I have no expectations for grants, writing papers, supervising students, doing research. If I want to do those things, great, that's off to the side. But my job's focusing on students. My class sizes are small. And so I think they get, maybe it's not better teaching per se, but just like it's a different experience.
We could call it like it is. They get better teaching.
Oh, hey.
They do. I mean,
let's call it what it is.
They do. I mean, it's true. I totally agree with that. Let me jump in, Chris, on this a minute real quick, because I agree completely. It requires a different student to be successful in the physical geology class that I teach versus the one that you teach, presumably, because I'm teaching 200 students, 180 of them are engineers. There's 8 TAs, like it's sort of mass produced, right? Yeah, it's a circus.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of energy, but you're kind of like, I'm just on stage the whole time. There's like a little bit of interaction, but I don't really, the students, I tell them right from the outset, if you want to get to know me, you got to come up after class and talk to me because I can't get to know a room of 200 students. And I'm just, I can only really lecture at you. That's just the way it is. So it requires a different student to be successful in that. And I don't think it's common to be good at that, to sit there and listen to somebody in a huge lecture hall and learn really well. So yeah, I agree completely. It's a student-teacher ratio matters a lot and correlates highly.
They're not getting as much attention. It's not as closed of a setting. I think certain students thrive in smaller group settings. Like we just did our last field trip last week out to City of Rocks, and yeah, it's me and 17 students in 2 vans, and we can all walk from outcrop to outcrop, and it's doable. Whereas 200 students, like you can't do that. The logistics are just impossible.
It's like lecturing versus educating, or what is the term for coaching? Instructional coaching is what you're doing more than I'm just lecturing at students.
Yeah, well, that's natural though, Jesse, because your job, you do research. That's your main
It's
job.
just the institution, and
Shawn and I, our job is to teach. That's what we do. That's our craft, and
that's our focus. Yeah,
that's right. And yours is not. It's a rare instance where you get somebody like a Richard Alley from Penn State, where you get this unique combination of somebody that is able to just crank out the research and also just connect with people.
And I've seen him connect with a room of 250 students, and it's it's amazing. That is a rare talent to be able to do that. I agree completely. So maybe, Shawn, this is a good transition to the origin story of your YouTube channel, which is, I'd imagine, a very different style of education than what you're doing in the classroom. So can you tell us just the origin story of that and what motivated you maybe to do this?
Well, and this I think mirrors some of the other characters that are doing geology education on YouTube. It was COVID. So, so COVID hits in March of 2020, and now I'm like, oh, great. The field trips I had planned for my students this spring, those are awash. Now we're doing this remote learning thing. It's all canned lectures. And so I was just trying to think of like, gosh, now in a little bit more time on my hands, which was probably helpful, but how can I bring that experience, which we're not going to have now, to the students? And I thought, well, if I can't bring the students on the field trip, how can I bring the field trip to the students? And so it started really simple with, I remember this just terrible point and shoot camera, and my 10-year-old son at the time, we did a hike to this part of the Snake River Canyon. I said, hey, just hit record and just keep me in the frame. And I'm going to talk for 2 minutes. And he did that. And it turned out okay. And it wasn't until that fall, though, that I got a little bit more serious about it. And I got a little better camera. And the president of the college let me go and paid for me essentially to go down to Death Valley. I said, hey, I'm going to sleep in my truck. I won't be near anyone. It's safe COVID-wise. And I did a series of videos down in Death Valley and just put them up there. And what I found was that, okay, yeah, the students were using them and that was great, but there was this other audience. There was this other group of people that I really wasn't intending to be the target audience, but they were eating it up. They had an appetite, a voracious appetite for this kind of knowledge. And it was mostly, the 50 and over crowd of retirees and people that were interested. They really wanted it. And so it grew slowly over time. I mean, that's sort of the origin story. We can maybe talk about where it went from, but that was kind of it. And mainly what I wanted to do initially was all field-based videos. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to these places. And I was getting cool comments from people who they had diseases, or they were on hospice care, or they just didn't have the mobility. And they're like, thank you for taking me to this place I never was able to get to. I mean, just the feel goods and the warm fuzzies you get were just, that was payment enough for the whole thing, was just getting that kind of feedback. And so just like anything, just like what you guys are doing, you get the good positive feedback and that motivates you to keep doing. You knew you kind of hit a chord and it was resonating with someone. So that was sort of the origins of it. COVID was the catalyst. And I watched Nick Zentner. I saw what he was doing in Washington. And that was a bit of my like kind of role model, was watching what he was doing, but then doing it in my own way and in a different style. He was doing mostly little lectures and backyard things. And I thought, well, I'm going to go out seal. I'm going to go show people cool faults and rocks and, things I can go touch and see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Shawn, I'm curious as to what's your time commitment in terms of like preparing for these things, doing it. And then what about the back end? All the communication, like what do you do with that? All the emails that you get and so on. This is something that Jesse and I deal with maybe on a smaller scale too, but I'm curious about this.
Well, I mean, a year ago it was easy. So like this time last year, first of all, you guys probably don't even know I exist. I had maybe like, and I was happy. This time last year, I was at like 20,000 subscribers and I was like, this is amazing. And I remember even like before that being at like 300 subscribers and then thinking like, oh, if I can get to 1,000, just kind of setting goals for myself, not for any monetary gain, just kind of like, let's see if we can keep attracting people. Let's see if we can keep this momentum going.
Yeah, what works and what doesn't. Like, you just kind of constantly iterating. Oh, that one works. People grabbed onto that for whatever reason. Like, do more.
And it's a crazy world. I still don't get it. Even 4 years in, like, I have no idea. As I launch out these videos, it's literally just throwing darts into the darkness and like, what's going to stick, what's not. But to answer your question, Chris, the time component, I'm pretty active and I'm outside anyway. And our family goes on trips and vacations. So I'm like, hey, I'm climbing Devil's Tower. I bet people would like to see these rocks and these columns and maybe a little bit on the history. Or I'm river rafting on the Salmon River. Like, hey, here's some sweet basement rocks. Let's go look at those. So it was easy to weave that stuff in. I've always, and I still do, a pretty simplistic method of, they're not slick productions. It's very bare bones. It's minimal editing. And in the early days, it was literally no editing. Pretty unscripted. It's just what's in my head and what I can remember. And sometimes I forget things like, oh, I forgot to tell them that that's Jurassic over there. Yeah. But it is what it is. And it's just sort of my style. So this time last year, I was able to handle the emails and communicate with the viewers in a very personal way. Since then, it's gotten much bigger, and I'm really blessed to have a gal in Iceland named Amanda Jo. She's actually an American. She's from PA. She's from Pennsylvania originally. She's been living there for about 10 years. She's married a guy over there. And during the whole Iceland thing about a year ago, she was letting me know what was going on because she was in Grindavik. She was in the town that ended up getting evacuated. So she's telling me insider information. And so that relationship grew. And then she told me like, hey, I have website skills and all these other skills, and I want something else to do. And so she basically volunteered to help me kind of run and manage
cool.
all the emails and stuff. So she helps out tremendously with a lot of that. As I'm looking at you guys, I look at my other screen over here, and I'm looking at my email inbox, and there's 20 emails I haven't got to yet. And some are easy, quick things like, hey, can you look at this rock? And okay. And others, I'm like, oh boy, I don't know if I have the time to answer this 2-paragraph essay kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I do the best I can. And I mean, I'm still trying to be of service to people. I see that as my role here at the community college. I'm kind of the only geologist in the area for the most part, but I still want to be able to help these people out that have questions about, and you guys get the same thing. Like, is this a meteorite? Here's my fossil. I mean, what's the geology of this interesting place I went to? So I think I try to do the best I can, but it is, as it grows, it becomes a little bit harder, of course.
Yeah, that's
for sure.
so interesting. I mean, I get that. Yeah, we at a smaller scale, I think we definitely get some of that type of stuff too. And we always are kind of like, hey, interesting question. It's going to take a while for us to answer. We got to learn a lot to answer that question. Or like, that's a place we're not super familiar with. So on the origin, or I guess not the origin story, but on the YouTube channel, I guess 2 questions. The first is what changed from a year ago? And the second is what we saw, I think, in the podcast sort of area is that, I mean, there was a lot of podcasts that got started during COVID. And I'd imagine it's the same with YouTube channels. And then, the ones that stick around, I guess, are sort of still around, obviously, and have gained in popularity. And so there's a lot that kind of didn't. So the question is like, do you see the same in the YouTube space? And then what happened a year ago? And are those two related, I guess, is kind of where I'm going with that a little bit.
Yeah, so you might need to remind me about the second question. But the first question was what happened?
That happens a lot, Shawn, with his questions. They go on. It's like a book, and then you forget.
Well, I put a pin in the first
middle of
one,
the book. Yeah, exactly. I have a hard time with this too. So
I guess what happened a year ago, and was the geology YouTube space saturated with other people or not? Do you feel like? I guess is kind of where I'm
okay.
going.
Those are easy. Thanks for concisely summarizing your questions, Jesse.
Anytime.
So what happened a year ago was, and it actually was exactly a year ago, exactly at this time, late October 2023. I'm watching, because I've been to Iceland several times. I'm kind of watching what's going on there. I'm interested in it. And there's a little bit of news coming out. And so I'm looking at their data and I'm seeing these earthquakes and the ground deformation. And I'm like, gosh, this is fascinating. And it looks like there's going to possibly be an eruption sometime soon. And on a total just whim, epiphany moment, I suppose, I thought, well, what if and up to this point, like my videos are field-based. Like that's my bread and butter. I go out in the field, I show you the geology, because I'm thinking the worst thing I could do is turn on my webcam and be a talking head or do a PowerPoint presentation. Who's going to watch that? That's a snoozer. But on a whim, I thought, well, maybe I'll turn on my webcam and talk people through these earthquake data and the ground deformation and, the data that we're looking at as scientists here in Iceland and see if there's any interest. And that took it to a totally different level. That was like that was a spike in everything. I mean, my viewership went up dramatically. And then, of course, the way it all played out in Iceland, it wasn't just me, but it was the drama of the moment. There was these earthquakes, serious earthquakes and shaking where a town was evacuated in one night. Ultimately, there was an eruption. There was the town and the community in Iceland building these large berms, these earthen barriers to protect them from the lava flows. I mean, you couldn't have scripted this any better. It was a Hollywood movie in terms of like the plot points. And because I was kind of the only one, I think, doing that. And I think it helped that I was kind of a calm voice. Like everyone was getting the sensationalist media takes on things. And I was just kind of like, hey, yeah, we might get an eruption. And here's what if we get an eruption, here's what's going to happen. And it's, if it rolls into town, that's going to be bad, but it's not end of the world. It's not, we shouldn't go to Iceland kind of thing. So that was like the big kind of bump, the big inflection point in the channel. And see, now I already forgot the second
question.
So
how saturated is the YouTube space?
Oh, saturated.
Because I'm kind of curious about this. Chris and I have talked about this. Like, geology it's interesting and it's very important, and more people should know about it. But it's
a niche.
It's not history. It's not. People don't gravitate towards it in the same way. So, do you think it's saturated or not? And that's the question.
I don't.
No? Okay.
I don't think it's saturated at all. I think in the YouTube world anyway. There's Nick Zentner. Nick is awesome. He's, I think, like a great model and has done amazing things with outreach to the public with science. He does tend to focus mostly on Pacific Northwest in his region, which is great. I think that's what he's mostly interested in. So I saw a huge niche in other places or my regions or things I can get to because I travel regionally around the West. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I just go down to, I can be in Yellowstone in like 4 hours. And like, how many cool things can I show them in Yellowstone? Here's ash flow tuffs, here's hydrothermal features, and so I don't think it's saturated at all. I mean, then there's Rachel Phillips, who you guys have interviewed, Geo Girl. There's Myron Cook, who is in Wyoming. He's got the big gray beard. He's kind of like the Bob Ross of geology. He does incredible videos. He doesn't do many of them, but when you see one, it's like an Oscar-winning performance with just amazing editing and cinematography. Yeah. So, I mean, there's only and there's more than just those 4 or 5, but there's not that many of us. So I feel like there's more niches to fill. I get requests all the time from people back east saying, hey, can you come out to Tennessee and do a random road cut here or talk about the Ouachita Plateau in Arkansas or just places I just don't know and I'm not going to get to. And I feel bad turning them away and telling them, hey, I hope someone pops up on the radar sometime soon that can help provide information, geologic information and interpretation about your region.
For the listener, there's a Philip Prince is somebody, I forget what his YouTube tag is. It's, I think, Geomodels. Yeah, he does a lot of Appalachian stuff.
He's good.
I've actually used that because when I moved to Penn State, I've never worked in the Appalachians, so I don't know much about the basic geology. So for my, inter-level class, I kind of want to make it relevant. So talk about the Carmelin Gap or talk about the Ridge and Valley, specific places that people would know. And so I've turned to his videos just for, again, the Appalachian sort of geology specific little stories. So anyway.
Yeah, and he does a good job. And I think he's more of like a geomorphologist. That's kind of what the sense I get. And he does a great job with like Google Earth and LiDAR and such. I think it's important, no matter who jumps into the arena, at least for me, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but like staying in my lane, I am only going to do videos and focus on things I'm comfortable with. And Rachel and I had this conversation too. Even though she and I have degrees in geology, we're very different geologists. She's biogeochemistry and lab stuff, and I'm a structural geologist. And so my roots are in other areas. And so there's things and topics and places that I'm probably never going to do a video on or cover because I'm not comfortable with it. Now, that being said, I do try to educate myself. I'll read papers or a field guide and be like, yeah, I think I can talk knowledgeably about this, or there's a cool story here. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do is figure out cool places, cool stories, and a way to explain it. I guess I've been told by people that I explain things well. And I think as scientists, we don't do a very good job of communicating to the public by and large. We are trained. I mean, you think about it. We go into school, just like all 3 of us did in college. And what are we taught? We are taught to write technically. Here's how you're going to write a paper. Here's how you're going to write an abstract. Here's how you're going to communicate. Here's how you're going to give your first conference talk or presentation or poster presentation. So the system grooms us to be a professional, and they should. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I don't think we do a very good job traditionally of preparing professional scientists, geologists for, okay, now go back to your grandma and explain it to her. Jesse, go explain your PhD research to your next door neighbor in a way and don't talk down to them, in a way they can understand. Because we learn all the technical jargon, we learn the cool terms, and then we infuse that into our writing and our oral communication. And that's one of the biggest obstacles where we lose people. And then it sounds like we're condescending because we're like, Cenozoic exhumation of the metamorphic core complex. And, then we lose people in that kind of jargon. When you can really explain it, I think, with different words, just think of some other synonyms, words that most people know, like exhumation. Oh, we're just going to lift the rocks up and expose them. Okay, why didn't you just say that? I mean,
I agree completely with that. I just to touch on this, Chris, and then I think you want to ask a question, but I agree completely that yes, we've been sort of trained to speak, in a certain jargon for sure, and I think that's fine to have the sort of scientific community speaking in their jargon because it's just a simpler form of communication for geologists to talk to each other in jargon-rich environment. But I do think, and I think it's something we do really well at Penn State in our graduate student program. Once they get more senior, they are kind of forced to do this kind of process. Like, okay, distill it down. Don't dumb it down, but distill it down. And there's a writing class that one of our very, very prolific professors, teaches, where she says, okay, write your thesis in 1 page, like the thesis proposal. Okay, cut it in half. Okay, cut it in half. Okay, cut it in half, all the way down until you're only allowed 5 words. What is your thesis in 5 words? And those 5 words have to be very, very precise and specific and not jargony. And that's a really, really hard exercise for students. But I think what you're saying, my whole point in this story is, I think it's harder to do that. It's really hard to do that. It's not an easy.
It's a different
trait.
mindset.
Yeah, and maybe a learned skill to kind of distill topics down a little bit.
And I think where I'm at, Jesse, sorry to jump in again, Chris, but
Chris, you can go to sleep. We'll wake you up when we're ready for your question here.
Chris is just he's more polite than you and I. We just jump in. But I think my position here, and being asked by the local Rotary Club to come talk about local geology, or being asked by the neighboring historical society, I think that has totally prepared me to do that. And I think maybe, I don't know this, Jesse, but like where you are at a bigger school and university, you're living at the other end of the spectrum. Most of your interactions are at the more research professional level. And so that's where a lot of your interaction is. So you're developing those skills. Like if I had to go right now and give a technical presentation at a GSA conference, I would sweat it. But if you asked me to go into a room with 200 people, just regular citizens, and explain something about geology, or, hey, go teach them about different fault types, no problem. Because that's kind of what I do every day.
Go ahead, Mr. Bullis. You're raising your hand back in the.
Oh, I can speak. Yeah. Okay, all right. Thanks so much, Jesse. I appreciate that. So I want to ask: did you do a live stream, kind of a play-by-play on the recent eruptions in Iceland?
Yeah, I've been doing several of those. Those have been going on since that first eruption in last December, and then there was an eruption in January, and February, and March, and May, and August, and so you probably seen me on those. And
this is crazy. I had you playing virtually all day in my classrooms, just in the background on the whole, because I went to Iceland this summer for 3 weeks with my wife.
I remember your podcast on that.
And so I just put this together. I'm like, wait a minute. I've seen this background. I've seen this face.
Okay.
You've seen this messy office.
So Shawn and everybody else, Chris is a little slow on the uptake these days. Let's put it that way. I mean,
oh, come on.
No, there's just some disconnected things he's just brought together.
Right brain, left brain. They just started communicating with one another over there.
That's right. That doesn't happen very often either.
No.
Well, real quick, one of the coolest things that happened with the whole Iceland live stream thing was I was contacted by a company called NatureEye, and they said, hey, we see, because I was just, reporting on the data, looking at the webcams, which are publicly available. And they said, hey, we have a new company. We have drones in Iceland that you can fly from your location in Idaho. And we would love for you to fly our drone over these eruptions when they're taking place, provide commentary. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So first of all, I was floored that like the technology existed. Like, really, this is something? And then it just turned out to be a great partnership. I just did one on Sunday, even though there's no eruption going on. We flew over the, very young lava field and over the spatter cones, and it's still just as cool to see, when it's not erupting.
That's amazing.
So that definitely added another level. And I think that the Iceland eruption, there were so many webcams like fixed on that thing. It was probably one of the most well-documented eruptions I've ever seen. And so the fact that I could just tap into these webcams on the internet and then show people and then like explain it as it's happening was like just really just good luck and just
that's
good fortune.
That is so cool. What is the company called?
NatureEye.
NatureEye. That is so cool. Wow.
Yeah. So you can sign up and they're doing it a lot with schools now, Chris. So you could they're letting the kids operate it and stuff. And they're doing a lot with schools now because it's not just Iceland. They have other locations around the world, like Machu Picchu, and some are geologic, some are like, other types of places in Africa.
That is very cool. Wow.
Where you can fly the drone and take pictures and get them uploaded. And anyway,
was it difficult to navigate and narrate at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to think how I would do that. That sounds impossible.
No, I don't multitask well. And so if you do watch those, sometimes when I'm flying the drone the commentary kind of just peters out a little bit.
That's
and it's harder than, I have a real drone. And if you've flown a drone, it has like little thumb joysticks, like a video game console. And so, they're touch sensitive. So you can just push it a little bit and the drone goes forward a little bit. The way to do it with NatureEye, though, is you have to use your keyboard. It's not touch sensitive. You push go forward and it just goes forward with it's just one speed basically. And you push up and it goes up. And so it's a little bit more wonky, but it still works well. And I mean, it's pretty awesome. Just cool technology.
That's crazy. So what are the safeguards in that, Shawn, in terms of, they're not going to let some 10-year-old drive this thing into the lava flow?
Yeah, so there is an operator on the ground. So there's a guy in Iceland named Johan who's actually there. He physically gets the Starlink system up and going, puts the drone on the ground, puts the battery pack in, turns it on. He's on the headset with me, and then he's like, okay, yeah, we're ready to go when you are. And then he turns the controls over to me. And then once the battery gets down to a certain point, either he flies it back or it'll just fly back. And then he's also there to make sure he'll tell me like my ceiling height, like, hey, don't go above this elevation, don't go below this elevation. There's someone there, a drone operator, to make sure you don't fly it into a mountain or, nosedive it into the lava or whatever.
Wow, that is amazing. I never heard of that before.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Really cool. Check it. You might like it for your classroom. Cool. It would be, it's pretty cool.
Very cool. Yeah. Wow, that's just, man.
That's amazing. All right, Shawn, we're going to transition here. We're going to shift directions. So you co-authored or authored Geology Underfoot for Idaho and Roadside Geology, two of our favorites. So
Chris and I spent a lot of time with Roadside Geology driving around, Roadside Geology books driving around.
When we're collecting, that's absolutely.
They're the best.
So one is I have an older version of the Roadside Geology for Idaho, and it's by Alt and Hindman. I think are their names. Right?
Yes, David Alt and
So now is this just a totally different edition of it? What was that process like? Can you describe that?
Yeah, so I guess I got to rewind a little bit. So the first book I wrote by myself was Geology Underfoot in Southern Idaho. Like you guys, I'm a big fan of the Mountain Press series, and every year they come out with a new title. And Geology Underfoot's a little different because it's more in-depth than Roadside. Roadside's just, hey, you're driving down the road. Roadside's like, hey, you're driving on Pennsylvania Highway 22, mile marker 31, you'll see this, then you'll see that. It's highlights. But the Underfoot book is meant to get out of your car, engage with the landscape. Maybe you hike a trail, go to an overlook, whatever. It tells you specifically where to go, what to look at, asks you questions, and then tells you and teases out the story as you go. So I was a much bigger fan of the Underfoot series, which is a newer series. There's not as many titles. So they'd come out with a new one every year. And I remember thinking, oh boy, please, book gods, will you please give us a Idaho one? That would be so cool. And I just got sick of waiting for it. And then just one day I thought, maybe I could do that. And so I just emailed the publisher and said, here's an idea. And they said, well, send us a proposal. I didn't really even have to send in an outline. I didn't even have to really send a sample of writing, or it's different than a regular book, right? If you're going to write the next Harry Potter, you're going to have to write the whole book and then try to get it published. I basically was allowed to, they're like, hey, if you write this thing, we will publish it. And so I wrote that one first, the Underfoot book.
When was this, Shawn? Roughly?
2017, 2016. Yeah, somewhere in there. And that was great. So I picked 22 sites in Southern Idaho with different themes and how to get there and what you're going to see. And then for the Roadside book, and then so a couple years later, they said, hey, the Roadside book from the 80s is very outdated. It's black and white. And Alt and Hindman have written a lot of great books, but one thing that always bugged me in that specific book was that they put out in that book the idea that the Snake River hotspot originated from a meteorite impact, which there is absolutely no evidence for. Yes, but yet that because it was in a book and it was in print, the general public that's all they knew about the Snake River Plain. And so I had to keep fighting that myth that no, there's no evidence for meteorite impact. It's a cool idea, but well, it's in the book. And so I was like, oh, so they contacted me and said, hey, we'd like you to write the new edition Roadside Geology of Idaho. And I said, I can't, because Idaho is huge. Idaho is 500 miles from north to south. I live in Southern Idaho and I know the geology pretty well. I'd only been to Northern Idaho once or twice. There's no freeway system up there. It takes 9 to 10 hours of driving through the mountains and canyons to get up there. I am not an expert in that. And I said, but I'd be interested in co-writing it. So I teamed up with two other authors, one of which is in Northern Idaho, Keegan Schmidt. And so we worked on it together kind of over COVID. And so that's a completely rewritten book with new road law. And if you really look at the old ones, they don't make a whole lot of sense. You're driving on a highway, they have a tangential article or side note on the page that's not even something you might even be able to see from the highway.
Oh,
so
really?
we wanted ours to be more in the vein of these newer books they have out, which is, okay, at milepost 22, look for this, and and actually what you're going to see from the road. And so that was a fun project, and definitely doing it with 2 other people was helpful. We just kind of split up the state geographically. Okay, Chris, you do this part. Jesse, you do this part. And it was hard to kind of blend all the writing styles together. I wrote the introductions. Anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not you 3 dirtbagging in a car
no.
for like 3 months.
There was only one time. The 3 of us were only physically.
That's what I'm envisioning.
The 3 of us were only actually together once. We met at Paul Inc. Has a condo in Sun Valley. Is that where we met? I think that's where we met. I have one of the only few copies of the book where all 3 of us signed it.
Oh, that's cool.
Because Keegan's up in Lewiston. Paul Inc. I see quite a bit. He's retired now. He's at Idaho State in Pocatello. Yeah, we split the state up geographically, drove our road logs, wrote it. There was an editor that kind of was there to kind of blend it and put it all together and keep us on track. So
this is such an
project,
interesting. You're the first person, Shawn, I've met that has done this for Roadside Geology. And so first of all, a little plug: people can buy signed copies on your website, right? Of both these books?
Yeah, there's a link there.
So there's a link there. We'll put a link to your website in the show notes here if people are interested in that. But the question is, you kind of touched on like ideas that are now not taken seriously are in a textbook. So therefore, the public believes or says, hey, it's in the book. What was your filter for that? In a hotly contested scientific kind of topic, if you covered any, what was your filter for I'm putting it in the book versus I'm not? Like, how much consensus do you need to have to put it into a book like this? You've thought on that?
That's a good, it was tricky because there were certain topics or themes or locations or geologic events that were not set in stone, no pun intended. And so in my writing, I tried to just say what we knew, like, hey, the origin of basin and range extension is controversial. There's many models, but here's one. Or I'd list like, hey, here's a couple of the ideas we have. So I try to not dig a trench in one specific area, but like let the viewer know that, hey, this is not consensus. We're still working in this regard. But here's our model. And I tried to be more specific using those kind of terms that this is the leading hypothesis. This is the current model rather than kind of dealing sort of in like absolutes. But yeah, ultimately, we did kind of have to pick with some things like, okay, you got to talk about this event. Which one of the 3 models are you going to give the most writing attention to? And so there probably is little bits of biases in there. And just like anything, if I could go back, I'd probably change some of it and rewrite this and that. And
yeah, but that just strikes me as a pretty intimidating position to be in, to kind of, because like you said, it's such an amazing how that kind of research in this as you were talking about before, very scientific literature and back and forth and debates that are totally in the weeds, how those get translated down to progressively down into books like this and then the public. And there's a lag there sometimes, right? Like the late heavy, I know Chris and I were talking about the late heavy bombardment. Like the scientific community thinks that is completely false and was made up in the 80s, but it's in every intro textbook still, and so it just takes a while for these things to kind of get out of circulation, these ideas a little bit. And so that task of writing just seems frankly very intimidating to kind of cover that stuff. So it's interesting.
I feel like though the Roadside book wasn't that hard because most of it, the road logs are pretty easy because like milepost 22, there's an outcrop of Silurian limestone. Like there's no controversy there. We know
okay, all right,
here's the rock type. We know the age. If you stop, you might find fossils, whatever. But you're right in writing the introduction, which dealt more with like the physiographic provinces and the themes and Snake River Plain and the Yellowstone hotspot. And so we put things in there as current as we could, like the whole Silesia idea of this, large igneous province that kind of got run over by North America, which wasn't on my radar like 10 years ago. But now there's more and more evidence building towards, this is actually how this anomalous hotspot that just pops up 17 million years, this is how it gets started. So we put that in there, and undoubtedly someone in another 30 years or less or more will rewrite the 3rd edition and be like, oh, Willsey and those other guys, like, they were out to lunch. Here's what we know. Here's what it is. And that's science.
That's the nature of it, right? It's just being the person, being the decision maker at that point. I think I appreciate your insight into that because it's always struck me as kind of an intimidating, sort of thing to do.
Yeah. But you were able to use the book, right? I mean, you were able to use the 1st edition, I would imagine, quite a bit.
Honestly, Chris, and no disrespect whatsoever to those authors. I don't think I use it hardly at all. There was so much
really
more information. Like since 1988, there's like so much more. I had geologic maps of roads they didn't have. I had geology field guides to roadside stuff, or published theses or journal. I had so much more at my disposal, and I leaned more heavily on that than the stuff they had written. And so, I mean, it really is a complete rewrite. They really are separate books, even though they cover the same area and some of the same themes. There's a pretty stark contrast. We have very rich, colorful geologic maps of every road that we cover, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And those were done by a great geologist and graphic designer in Montana. So, but kind of back to Jesse's point, it's not a peer review process. So when the three of us decided, that this is correct, and this is, quote unquote correct, and the editor didn't know, she knew a little bit of geology, but she's not a professional geologist. So she's just making sure that we don't go past our word count and it all formats well. And so there wasn't a lot of safeguards to we did, I think, send out some parts of it to geologists that would know, like, hey, read this through and make sure there's no red flags, or what did I screw up here, just to kind of get eyes on it. But it wasn't like vigorously vetted or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, almost more stressful that way, perhaps. But
I agree. Like my stress level just rose.
I can see Chris is getting worked up. The veins coming out in the middle of the forehead there a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, but I do want to say, Shawn, that is what a contribution to the community, though. Seriously, I mean, these books I have found them invaluable. And you're right, Geology Underfoot and Roadside Geology are very, very different books, but you use them for different purposes, and it's just it's an incredible contribution to the community. So, like, hats off to you for taking that on, because I think that's a lot of pressure and a lot of work. And
it was fun to work on. But that being said, I mean, here's the interesting thing: people have asked me, like, "Are you going to do another one?" And at the time, I did earmark, or sort of reserved for Mountain Press, the publishing company. I said, "Hey, leave the Geology Underfoot in northern Utah to me, because I know that area well. Also, I'd love to write that one." That was my intention 4 or 5 years ago. But now with the YouTube thing, I've realized, I mean, if you think about how many books I'll sell, like, over the course of my lifetime, it's a drop in the bucket compared to how many people I can reach using these video formats. And so I'm not saying I won't pursue that, but right now that's lower on my radar, because, like, a book about geology is going to limit your window. A book about Southern Idaho geology, holy cow, that's a really narrow lane. Most people won't even know it exists. So you just can only reach so many people. I know how many copies our books have sold, and I'm proud of that work. And books give you, like, I think, a little more street cred and clout, I suppose. But in terms of, like, reaching people with geology education, the videos are a far more effective way to do it.
That's one thing I certainly thought about when we were talking about with Rachel, and it's the same with you, Shawn. Like, one of your videos reaches more people than any of the public.
I heard you say that.
All the papers I've ever published, anybody's ever read, right? Like, it's kind of it's really amazing. I mean, it is just totally cool and amazing. And so
amazing, but probably depressing a little bit too, because you put a lot of work into your research.
I mean, but they serve different purposes, right? But it's just amazing. The reach is just kind of unbelievable. So on that note, I kind of have a question now that we're coming back to YouTube a little bit. Like, you strike me as somebody who loves to learn. How have you experimented with your YouTube content? Like, I forget which video, maybe it was a recent one, where you were out in the field, you were recording video, and then you kind of turned to the car hood and you had a sketch drawn on the car hood, and then you kind of go back to the outcrop and you kind of go back and forth. And that struck me. It just really reminded me of teaching field geology courses. Like, that is something you do in field geology, right? You say, here's the outcrop, look at this, then turn to my little notebook I've gotten drawn, or my whiteboard I've drawn, and then go back and let students look at the outcrop. Is that something you've experimented with? How has your YouTube teaching methodology changed?
I don't think it's changed a lot. I think there's been some, like, improvements. This is embarrassing, but if you watch the old Death Valley ones, you'll see that I'm in the frame the whole time. Like, I have the camera selfie stick out at arm's length, and my head is in the entire video, because I didn't know anything about the YouTube world, and all the kind of whatever videos I watched beforehand, that's what I saw, as I saw a talking head. And so I thought I had to do that. And at some point, after I did those Death Valley ones, I had a viewer say, hey, you don't need to show us your head the whole time. You can show us the rocks. And I'm like, that's brilliant. Because I don't want to be in the shot anyway. And so
really
just
funny.
like, I mean, stuff like that should have been obvious and I probably would have figured out at some point anyway. But like the viewers have been very helpful with their comments about ways to improve, like or one thing I'm awful at, because I'm very kind of like animated and energetic, is like I'll turn the camera on and then I'm swinging it back and forth. And if you look over there, you'll see this, and then look at that over there. And people are like, "You were making us seasick. Like we were nauseous
Blair Witch
watching
Project
this."
or something like that,
Right? And so I'm still not great at it, but like, okay, the
funny.
slow pan. So what's interesting is when you do these videos, is you're the actor, you're the director, you're the camera operator, you're the producer, you're the sound person, you're the script writer, like. It's all me out there by myself. I almost never have anyone with me. And so in terms of like the diagrams and stuff, I just always think like, is there a way, and I'm not a good artist, I'm a terrible artist, but I'm like, is there some way to just make a sketch that will help reinforce that? And so I'll take a minute and draw something and just try to show that. I think the one you maybe saw was like, I think it was Split Mountain.
Yes, it was. That's right. It was Split Mountain. Yep. Yeah. And it's beautiful. I loved it because I thought, it just reminded me of being in a field geology class where students look at this, pointing there, and then turn to the sketch that simplifies it and then go back and look at it. It just reminded me of sitting in a field geology class. It was amazing. I loved it. So I was wondering how much that iterated, but that seems like it comes natural. So,
I mean, but it's different than if the three of us go on like a geology conference field trip, then it's like, oh, we got to plot the geologic map, and that's not going to work as well with the viewers, not just visually, but like it's too much such technical information. So what's a cartoon, a block diagram, a cross section that can show how this process or this feature comes to be? And so I don't think they've changed too much. I've edited a little bit more. I'm a little more aware of like how the finished product looks. And so I think there is slow improvement. But I stand behind all the old ones, even though they're cringy. I'm like, that's good content.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
We could relate.
I'm explaining it well, right? You guys, same thing with your podcast.
I
right?
might not stand behind some of the early ones. They're pretty bad audio content.
What is Chris and Jesse episode 1? Like how
it's pretty rough.
Oh my gosh, it's so rough. Yeah, it's rough.
Real rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I kind of you guys should keep those, right? Keep those in your archives, just like I keep those old videos as like a reminder. Like, hey, that's where I was. That's when I had 100 subscribers and I was elated to just be out there doing it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
It's great.
Shawn, I want to ask you about where's the line in terms of how deep do you go? How complex do you get? Like, I mean, this is something that Jesse and we battle this all the time, really. Do you have the same struggles? How
for like making the videos on a topic or whatever?
Yeah. How in depth do you go? Because, you're not touching really the depth of your knowledge in this. You're communicating it to everybody out there. So I find that to be a very difficult thing in terms of, bringing it down to a level that's understood by the masses rather than the few. And it's just such a fine line.
Yeah, no, good point. I think for me, I think about the story first. Like what's kind of like Jesse said at the beginning, like give me your thesis in a paragraph, in a sentence, in, maybe not down to 5 words, but so succinctly. And outcrops are easy because like, okay, here, what is this outcrop telling us? What information do we have? And so for me, it's starting with like the story. If I think there's something cool here, it could be a process, it could be a landscape, and knowing, okay, I'm going to probably do this in 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm not going to try to cover everything. Like the one I just did down in Northern Nevada was like spheroidal weathering in granite. So I didn't spend, even though I could have spent time looking at the mineralogy of the rocks and talking about textures and granodiorite and why there's magma even there. What's the topic? What's the focus? And what's the easiest way to explain this? Like show them the outcrop. So usually it's showing them the feature and then going maybe to the clipboard or the diagram or whatever. I don't know, maybe I'm just simple-minded. I often don't get distracted by, if there's more topics and a bigger story there, I will tend to break it into chunks. And I've gone to one location and done 4 videos, but on 4 different things. Okay, now let's look at this rhyolite lava flow, and there's a video. Okay, in part 1, you saw this. Now in part 2, we're going to look at this other thing over here. And so, yeah, for me, I don't know. I guess I've hardly ever been like blown away with like, oh, this is so complicated. How am I going to do this? Because I think maybe I just have a good sense for, or maybe I'm just a simpleton. of just, here's the story, here's the most compelling geologic feature or story at this location, and I'm going to tell that. And I'm not going to try to give them the whole 4.5 billion years at this location in one video.
I think that's an interesting way to think about it. From the sort of rock, from an outcrop, it kind of narrows your focus by definition, as it should, right? It's sort of on this, what do these rocks tell us, very conservatively, maybe. So how Shawn, are you going to, what's your plans for the YouTube channel? I mean, what can viewers sort of expect from you in the future?
I mean, I've kind of added a few series. They start out with all these field-based videos. The school even gave me, here's something crazy. I got last fall, I was on sabbatical. And my project that I pitched to the college as a sabbatical was traveling around the West and making YouTube field-based videos. And the president said, yes, that sounds like a great idea.
That's amazing.
So I got a whole semester off of teaching. So I think I'll continue to keep doing the field-based videos, but then I've added things like a little interview series. I've interviewed Rachel and some of these other people, different scientists. I want to keep doing that. I want to maybe add different careers. So I need to, I'm kind of stuck by myself as the sole geologist here. I need to find a mining geologist and a environmental hydrogeologist. And it'd be fun to like bring some of those in. And I think that would be of interest to both the viewers, but also like students. And then I've just built these little kind of playlists or series. There's random road cuts. So that's like the easiest video of all. So it's like stop at a road cut you've never seen or hardly seen before and just get out, roll the tape and make observations and walk the viewer through what you're seeing. And then hopefully come up with some viable interpretations of what you're seeing.
That's nice.
Those are easy because you don't need any knowledge ahead of time. There's no diagram. We're not diagramming anything. There's no visuals here. I don't even know how old these rocks are. I'm just pulling over on the side of the road.
But that's like how a geologist thinks, how to think like a geologist. That's really, I like
exactly.
that. That's a cool idea.
And they're not like huge view videos, but they have like a real kind of cult following. Like people really love those because it's what they're experiencing. They're out on little hikes and walks in their neck of the woods, and they're working through that same process. So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to do, I'll do more of the Iceland stuff but I pick things that I'm interested in, and I feel like I have something to say about it. If someone pushed me or incentivized me to do something on, the Arctic gneisses that you study, Jesse, I'd be like, well, okay, that's not going to happen because I don't. But I'd say, hey, I know a guy, or something like that.
There's somebody out there who studies it. Yeah,
right. Canadian Shield Geology, and so I don't know what the future holds. I'm just going to keep doing like in my gut what I'm interested in, what people seem to enjoy, and just what helps me grow and learn as an individual as well.
Totally cool. So, okay, well, one last question for me, and then I'll turn it over to Chris for the last one here. How much have you learned by doing this process, by doing this YouTube channel?
Oh my gosh. Like this has been like a lot. I mean, it's been incredible to learn. I mean, the geology that I've learned is pretty minimal and probably the least important thing. I've learned a lot about people, what people are interested in. The viewers are incredible. They teach me things all the time in terms of not just geology, but how the videos could be better or communication styles. I've just learned that there's an audience for everything, that there is a niche kind of everywhere. And if you're genuine and if you're yourself and if you're interested in the topic, people will probably listen and tune in. And so it's incredibly rewarding. It's fun to do. It's really an extension of what I do anyway. So it is work, but it doesn't ever feel like work because it's going out and explaining geology to people. That's what I'm paid to do.
To be honest, Shawn, real quick, I'm surprised that you think you've learned very little with regard to geology specifically. Or you mean that's minor compared to everything else?
Yeah, I think to me it's a lesser amount of growth than some of these other kind of tangential things. So I mean, I have learned. I mean, definitely like Iceland geology. I'd been there. I knew a little bit, and definitely now that I've become unintentionally sort of like this regional expert, I've dove into papers and read a lot, but I still defer to like, some of those Iceland professors who have worked there their whole lives. And I mean, that's what I feel like my role is I'm not the expert on anything. I'm just maybe a good communicator. And so I learn from the experts. I read the papers because the public trying to read the papers, they're going to run into all these roadblocks we talked about, but I can understand that, I can digest it, and then I can present it in a way that the public can. So I'm kind of the middleman. I'm a middleman. So.
Well, Jesse, what do you think?
Yeah, I would
we at that
Shawn,
point?
we've taken up a ton of your time. Grace, why don't we?
No, it's all good.
Why don't we
It's been
get out
fun
of here?
talking to you guys.
Yeah, this has been fun.
No.
We could talk for another hour and a half, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll do a follow-up one sometime.
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah.
We like to close out, Shawn, with this question. So what has been your best day as a geoscientist?
Oh boy. I mean, I think everyone would say a field day, right? Like just definitely like being outside. I think just being, it's easy. I don't have a specific day, like a time and year or whatever, but any day I'm outside with an interested group of people, be it students, YouTube viewers, maybe I'm at a national park and two people wander up and are wondering why I'm writing stuff down or I have a notebook or whatever, and explaining geology and sharing with people and then watching that click with them. Like, oh, I get it now. Like just watching the light bulbs go off in people. And I'm sure, Chris, both of you as educators, you know what that's like. That's the best reward of all, is having those moments. It helps if you're in a great setting on a nice day out in the field. That's the cherry on the Sunday, I suppose. But just I think we're humans. We're wired to share with people. Social media is popular because it's based on sharing. And we share things we love. Hey, Jesse, I just ate at a great restaurant. Hey, Chris, I just had an amazing drink at this bar or whatever. And so we just share things we love. And, like you guys, I love geology and education. And so it's an easy thing to do. And it's just awesome that there's this platform that exists, but it could be anything, where we can share to so many people, like people from around the world. I get emails from people in other countries, and that's just crazy. Like, to think that... Cool. Yeah, they're watching, and here I am in little podunk Southern Idaho at a 2-year college. Like, I'm no big deal, but yet to these people, I am, because I'm this person that's on their screen teaching them, and they appreciate that. And maybe they missed that window in their life where they could have learned some geology or taken a class, or maybe they just come around to it later in life. And so it's just fun to be able to fill that void in their life and make a difference.
Yeah, I think that really well put. The relationship building aspect is so interesting and so important, and your passion comes across in spades in your channel, and I encourage people to go check it out. So, Shawn, thanks very much for this has been a pleasure talking to you about all things, and I think your channel's awesome. And Roadside Geology and Geology Underfoot, I haven't read the books, but because I haven't been to Southern Idaho in a long time.
Well, come on out, guys. I'll take you rafting. We'll go climbing.
That'd be awesome. That'd be totally cool. Well, thanks a lot for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's been totally fun.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm a fan of both of you. Appreciate all you guys do as well.
We appreciate you. You are an educator down to your soul. I mean, it comes through. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Thanks, Shawn. Hey, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening. You can follow us on all of our social medias at Planet Geocast. There's multiple ways to support us. We've got merch available at our website, planetgeocast.com. You can also check out all of our CampGeo content on our mobile app, the CampGeo mobile app. First link in your show notes there. Well, actually, second or third link in your show notes. But there we have a ton of visual podcast series on a bunch of different content, including a bunch of free stuff. The first class you take in a college, geology major trajectory. So that's another way to support us. Send us an email, planetgeocast@gmail.com with any questions.
Cheers.
Peace.